There used to be a very specific feeling that existed after midnight. Not excitement, not fear exactly. Something slower than that. A kind of atmospheric looseness. Like the world itself relaxed its grip for a few hours. Like reality became less supervised. And I don't think that feeling exists anymore. I realized this a few nights ago, sitting in a grocery store parking lot at 1:12 in the morning eating gas station peanuts, because apparently this is what middle age turns into if you don't actively fight it. The parking lot was almost empty except for one pickup truck idling near the cart return, and a woman sitting alone in her car, staring at her phone with the expression people now reserve for receiving medical results. Everything was bright. Not warm bright, surgical bright. LED parking lot lights that make every surface look emotionally exhausted. And I had this strange realization that nights used to belong to human beings, and now they belong to infrastructure. Even the silence feels industrial now, you know what I mean? There used to be shadows between things, dead zones, areas where the world briefly stopped reporting on itself. But now everything feels continuously monitored, continuously illuminated, and continuously updated. Like somewhere, at all times, a machine is awake, taking inventory of your existence. Maybe that sounds a little dramatic, but I think millions of people quietly feel this way. The atmosphere changed. In a world full of noise, trust the signal. If you're hearing this, you've already found it. This is Dove and Serpent Radio. I don't know when exactly it happened. Maybe sometime between smartphones becoming permanent body extensions and every building replacing its old sodium vapor lights with those pale white LED systems that make every parking lot look like a temporary military installation. Maybe sometime after social media stopped feeling social. Maybe sometime after we all became performers accidentally. But nights used to feel hidden, and now they feel observed. I remember being younger and driving around for no reason at 2 a.m, because there was genuinely nothing else to do. You would drive through neighborhoods where televisions flickered behind curtains. Maybe one gas station would still be open, maybe a diner, maybe a guy smoking outside a closed laundromat. The whole world felt quieter, but more alive somehow. Imperfect. Human. You felt anonymous in a comforting sort of way. Now, when people drive at night, they're usually delivering something, or documenting themselves, or listening to a productivity podcast designed to optimize their inner life into manageable quarterly growth metrics. Even insomnia has become monetized. I saw a video recently called 3 a.m. Anxiety Reset Routine. And I know this sounds small, but something about that title genuinely disturbed me, because there used to be parts of human existence that weren't content categories. Now every private emotional state immediately becomes searchable. Loneliness optimization, heartbreak hacked, dissociation explained, how to recover your dopamine baseline, 10 signs you're emotionally unavailable, why your nervous system feels unsafe. Everything gets converted into informational packaging before we've even fully experienced it ourselves. And I think people are exhausted partly because they no longer experience emotions directly anymore. They experience themselves experiencing emotions, and that's different. You can feel the difference in your body. I think about this constantly now. The way people no longer sit inside feelings naturally. They immediately begin analyzing, documenting, categorizing, and narrativizing themselves in real time. A guy gets rejected, and within 15 minutes he's searching attachment theory videos. A woman feels emotionally numb and immediately wonders if she has unresolved trauma because an algorithm suggested it. Someone feels disconnected at work, and suddenly they're diagnosing themselves with existential burnout from a 30-second clip narrated by a therapist speaking in the cadence of a hostage negotiator. And listen, hey, some of those things are real. Yeah, some people absolutely do have trauma. Some people are genuinely burned out. And some people do need language for what they're experiencing. But I think something else happened too. We lost our ability to let experiences remain mysterious long enough for them to become wisdom. Now they become content immediately. And content moves too fast to metabolize. And you know what's strange? I don't think human beings evolved to continuously witness this many interpretations of themselves. That might actually be part of why everyone feels psychologically fragmented now. Because every feeling instantly branches into thousands of possible explanations. You're not just sad anymore. Now you might be emotionally dysregulated, spiritually disconnected, dopamine depleted, shadow suppressed, avoidantly attached, burned out, overstimulated, understimulated. Midlife awakening, grief cycle, nervous system activated, ego dissolving. At a certain point, you stop inhabiting your life and start auditing it. And people are getting tired in this very deep, invisible way because of it. Not physically tired, interpretively tired. I think that's the phrase, interpretively tired. There's a certain exhaustion that comes from constantly translating yourself. I noticed this recently while texting someone that I care about. Have you ever typed out a completely normal sentence and then suddenly become aware of how it could theoretically be interpreted 6 different ways? So you rewrite it, then you rewrite it again, then you add an emoji to soften it, and then you remove the emoji because maybe it changes the tone too much. Then you stare at the screen, wondering if you sound distant or needy or passive-aggressive. or emotionally unavailable. Human beings used to communicate mostly through presence. Now, we communicate through forensic linguistic analysis. And it's making everyone slightly insane. I honestly think entire relationships now collapse because people are reacting to imagined subtext generated by chronic digital hyperawareness. Somebody takes 3 hours to reply because they fell asleep. The other person spirals into a psychological investigation involving attachment wounds, emotional reciprocity imbalance, and perceived withdrawal patterns. And meanwhile, the first person is literally unconscious, drooling into a pillow somewhere. Modern life creates phantom meanings. That's what it does. We're surrounded by informational ghosts. And because human brains are pattern recognition machines, we keep inventing narratives to explain emotionally incomplete data. That might actually explain why the internet feels increasingly paranoid lately. Not politically paranoid, necessarily. Existentially paranoid. People sense something is wrong, but can't locate it precisely. So the brain keeps searching for hidden frameworks, hidden systems, hidden agendas, hidden truths, hidden motives. But I wonder sometimes if the real hidden thing is simpler. Maybe we're overwhelmed because the human nervous system was never designed to remain psychologically available to hundreds of people simultaneously. There are people right now carrying emotional residue from conversations they never even physically had. Think about that. Someone halfway across the world posts a sad sentence online, and now your mood shifts slightly while brushing your teeth before bed. Someone you barely knew from high school suddenly appears in your feed divorced and exhausted, and somehow that enters your emotional atmosphere too. We absorb fragments of strangers continuously now. And I think people underestimate how biologically strange that is. For most of human history, your emotional ecosystem consists of maybe 40 people. Now your nervous system casually processes thousands. No wonder everyone feels vaguely haunted all the time. There's too much psychic traffic. And the nights used to help with that. That's what I miss the most. Nighttime used to feel like the nervous system's natural decompression chamber. You'd drive somewhere. You'd walk somewhere. You'd sit somewhere. And eventually your thoughts settled. But now, nights are just daytime wearing darker clothes. The feeds continue. The notifications continue. The stimulation continues. The comparison continues. Even silence has advertisements hidden inside it now. I stopped at a gas station around 3 a.m. last winter during a snowstorm. And I swear it felt like entering a dream designed by an exhausted corporation. The coffee machines hummed under fluorescent lights. A rotating hot dog display spun slowly like a cursed artifact. A teenage employee stood motionless near the counter, staring at nothing with a 1,000-yard stare of someone whose soul had recently left the premises. And over the speakers was this incredibly upbeat pop song, trying desperately to convince everyone that life was exciting. Meanwhile, outside there was just endless snow and darkness and frozen air, and this weird realization that modern civilization often feels emotionally disconnected from physical reality. Like the system keeps insisting everything is normal, while human beings quietly deteriorate underneath it. I think about grocery stores a lot lately, especially at night. There's something deeply revealing about the way people move through grocery stores now. Nobody makes eye contact anymore. Everybody looks slightly overclocked. You can almost see cognitive fatigue radiating off people. And sometimes I'll notice someone standing motionless in an aisle, staring at shelves without actually choosing anything, just like frozen for a second. Like their consciousness is buffering. I genuinely believe attention fatigue has become one of the defining psychological conditions of modern life. It's not because people are weak, it's because the environment is relentless. Every app competes for neurological territory. Every platform wants emotional engagement. Every screen wants reaction. Don't forget to hit the like button on this video. And eventually people lose contact with the quieter forms of awareness. The ability to simply notice things without extracting value from them. That's disappearing. I knew something had changed a few years ago when I realized that I could no longer watch a movie without subconsciously reaching for my phone during the slower scenes. That terrified me a little bit. Not because phones are evil, but because slowness itself had started feeling intolerable. And slowness is where a lot of reality actually lives. That's where grief lives. That's where love lives. That's where memory lives. You can't speed run those things. There's a strange modern pressure to convert every experience into immediate utility. Even hobbies became productivity adjacent somehow. People can't just draw anymore, right? Now they need a following, they need a store, they need a monetization strategy, a personal brand. You can feel the exhaustion inside that. Not every part of human existence should become economically visible. Some things need privacy to remain spiritually alive. I really believe that. I think one reason older songs hit harder now is because they come from periods of your life that existed before total self-documentation. You hear a song from 2007 and suddenly you remember who you were before your personality became partially externalized online. Before every opinion needed presentation. Before every moment carried hypothetical audience awareness. And maybe some of you younger listeners won't fully understand this feeling yet, because you grew up inside this architecture. But there was once a version of life where disappearing for a few hours was normal. Nobody panicked. Nobody tracked your location. Nobody wondered why your status changed. You could just exist unreported for a while. That mattered psychologically more than we realized. There is a reason why we romanticize road trips and diners and empty highways and late night radio stations. Those things represent a temporary escape from social visibility. A chance to become undefined again. I think human beings desperately need periods of undefinition. Otherwise, identity hardens into performance. And once identity becomes performance, exhaustion follows. Because performances cannot truly rest. I saw a man at a rest stop once, sitting alone at a picnic table, eating fries in complete silence. At 2:30 in the morning. No phone. No music. No visible distraction, just sitting there, looking at trucks moving through the highway fog. For some reason, that image has stayed with me all these years. Because he looked peaceful. Not happy, exactly, but unobserved. There's a difference. Modern people rarely experience true, unobserved existence anymore. Even when we're alone, we're anticipating future visibility, right? Future interpretation, future capture. We have internalized the audience. That's what's changed. The audience moved inside the mind. And once that happens, solitude becomes harder to access. You start narrating yourself unconsciously, performing reactions privately, curating emotional expression even when nobody is present. That sounds absurd, right? Until you notice yourself doing it. And once you notice it, you can't entirely unnotice it. Sometimes I wonder if that's why so many people suddenly feel disconnected from who they really are. Because there's no clean boundary anymore between authentic self and performed self. The layers blurred together. And I don't even think this happened maliciously. I think technology simply evolved faster than our human emotional architecture. That's all. But the consequences are enormous. There are teenagers now who have never experienced boredom without immediate digital interruption. That changes cognition. Boredom used to force these strange internal journeys. You'd stare at ceilings, replay memories, invent scenarios, notice tiny details. Some of the deepest realizations of human life arrive through uninterrupted mental drift. Now, drift gets intercepted instantly, which may explain why people increasingly describe feeling emotionally unreal. Dissociation is becoming normalized language because modern environments themselves feel dissociative. Artificial light, artificial pace, artificial identity reinforcement, artificial urgency. Human beings adapted to villages and weather patterns. Now we adapt to notifications and algorithms. And maybe that adaptation carries hidden psychological costs that we only barely understand. There's an odd local story I heard years ago from a night janitor who worked in an office building downtown. He said that around 4 a.m, the building felt more emotionally honest than during daytime hours. That during the day everybody performed professionalism and confidence and competence, but at 4 a.m, all that disappeared. You'd find half-finished coffee cups, handwritten notes, forgotten family photos, tiny signs of exhaustion everywhere. He said offices at night felt like abandoned theater sets after the actors went home. And that stayed with me. Because I think modern life is filled with environments that only become emotionally truthful after people leave them. Restaurants after closing, malls before opening, schools during summertime, airports at midnight. The mask slips slightly. Maybe that's why people like late night radio in the first place. Because it feels less managed, less optimized. Like someone speaking before the machinery of daytime fully activates again. You know what else I've noticed lately? People confess strange things to each other now. Not intimate things necessarily, existential things. You'll be standing somewhere completely ordinary and someone suddenly says something incredibly vulnerable with like almost no warning. Like a cashier quietly saying, "I don't really feel like myself anymore." A rideshare driver admitting he sometimes forgets entire weeks emotionally. A coworker staring out a window saying, "I think everyone's pretending harder than they used to." These little fractures happen everywhere now. Tiny moments where the performance collapses for half a second. I think that's because people are lonelier than statistics can measure. Not physically alone necessarily, but psychologically unseen. there's a difference. You can spend all day interacting with people and still feel fundamentally unrecognized. Especially if most interactions occur through roles. Employee, customer, content creator, profile, account, username. Human beings need spaces where identity softens, where conversation wanders, where uncertainty is allowed. That's part of what this channel is, I think. Or maybe what it's trying to be. Not answers. Just recognition. A place where someone driving through darkness at 2:17 a.m. hears another human voice admit that the world feels strange sometimes. And maybe theirs does too. We had a strange weather alert come through earlier tonight, actually. Dense fog advisory across several counties. Visibility dropping below a quarter mile near the interstate. There's something about fog that still affects people psychologically in a very primal way. You can feel it. Fog changes spatial certainty. The world loses edges. Distances become emotional instead of visual. You start realizing how much comfort comes from being able to clearly see what's ahead. Modern life feels foggy like that lately. Not catastrophic, just, obscured. People don't know what they're building toward anymore. And that uncertainty leaks into everything. Relationships, careers, identity, politics, technology. It leaks into meaning itself. I think a lot of modern anxiety is actually future blindness. Human beings can tolerate hardship surprisingly well if they understand direction. But uncertainty corrodes people slowly. Especially invisible uncertainty. And the weird thing is, society keeps acting confident while privately feeling unstable. And that contradiction creates psychological static. Everybody senses it. Nobody fully names it. Which might explain the popularity of podcasts and long-form conversations right now. People are starving for environments where thought unfolds naturally instead of being compressed into performance fragments. Even attention spans might not actually be collapsing the way people claim. Maybe people are starving for sincerity and simply rejecting artificiality faster. I've noticed listeners can sit through 3-hour conversations if they feel emotionally real. But 30 seconds of fake enthusiasm feels unbearable now. People are developing advanced detection systems for inauthenticity, probably because we're drowning in it all day, every day. And you know what's interesting? I think exhaustion itself has become part of modern identity performance. Everyone talks about being tired constantly, burned out, overwhelmed, running on fumes. And some of that is absolutely real. But I also think people use exhaustion now as some kind of proof of legitimacy. Like if you're not exhausted, maybe you're not participating correctly. That's dangerous. A civilization that glorifies depletion eventually forgets what healthy human rhythms even look like. There are genuinely people who feel genuinely guilty resting, guilty sitting still, guilty doing nothing productive, guilty existing without optimization. That's not sustainable psychologically. Human beings are not operating systems. And somewhere deep down, I think people know this, which is why certain moments hit so hard now. Simple moments. Hearing rain against a car roof, driving through empty streets, finding an old voicemail, watching snow fall under streetlights, hearing distant train horns at night. Those moments temporarily reconnect people to uncommodified existence, reality before branding. Maybe that sounds overly poetic, but I don't think it is. I think people are genuinely starving for texture, for slowness, for atmosphere, for imperfection, for emotional continuity. There's a reason vinyl records came back. Why people romanticize analog technology, why handwritten notes feel sacred now. Imperfection signals humanity. And humans trust humanity more than perfection. Even this station. Half the reason late night radio feels comforting is because it sounds slightly flawed. A cough in the microphone, a delayed transition of voice getting quieter for a second, like the host forgot where they were going. Those imperfections create presence. Perfect systems feel emotionally vacant after a while. Maybe that's another thing people are sensing lately. An increasing absence of friction. Everything smoother, faster, cleaner, simplified. But friction was where texture lived. Waiting mattered. Anticipation mattered. Distance mattered. Now, everything arrives instantly and somehow feels emotionally thinner because of it. I ordered food recently and watched a tiny digital map show the driver approaching my house in real time. And suddenly I remembered being younger and ordering a pizza without any tracking system at all. You just waited. Maybe 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes, maybe an hour. And there was mystery in that. Now certainty replaced anticipation. And certainty is useful, but mystery nourishes certain parts of the human soul too. We need some unknown spaces, not terrifying unknowns, but spaces where life unfolds without total informational control. That's why people still stare out airplane windows even though they know exactly how air travel works. Wonder survives explanation sometimes. I think about aging a lot more lately too. Nothing really dramatic, just, noticing the little shifts. A strange moment when you realize your memories no longer feel sequential. They feel geographic. Entire emotional continents you can visit but not fully return to. You remember versions of yourself almost like former tenants. And occasionally, something tiny unlocks them again. A smell, a phrase, a song playing in a gas station at night. Suddenly, the 17-year-old you appears for half a second like a radio signal crossing frequencies. The feeling's hard to explain. It's beautiful, but unsettling, because it reminds you that identity was never as stable as you assumed. You've already been so many people. And maybe the reason modern life feels so disorienting is because technology records old selves too efficiently. Old photos, old posts, old messages, old versions of your thoughts preserved indefinitely. Human beings used to shed identities more cleanly. Now the archive follows you forever. And psychologically, I don't know if we were ever meant to constantly encounter preserved ghosts of ourselves. Sometimes growth requires partial forgetting. There's a strange liberation in not being continuously confronted with previous incarnations of your own consciousness. That's another reason nighttime feels important. Darkness naturally reduces informational overload. It narrows reality, makes existence smaller for a while. Just headlights, breathing, road sounds, a voice through speakers. It's no wonder people drive around at night when life becomes emotionally unbearable. Movement plus darkness creates temporary psychological relief. You become less visible to yourself somehow. We've got a quiet sponsor tonight, by the way. Tonight's broadcast is brought to you by the last open diner on the edge of town, where the waitress calls everybody hun, regardless of age, profession, or existential condition. Open 24 hours, Coffee strong enough to restart damaged timelines. Tell them the night sent you. I used to think loneliness meant absence. Now I think it often means lack of resonance. You can be surrounded by people and still feel emotionally unreflected. Like your internal world produces no echo. And I suspect that's why certain conversations become unforgettable. Not because they were dramatic. Because someone briefly saw the same strange thing you saw. Recognition is one of the deepest human needs. It's not admiration. It's not attention. Recognition. To have another consciousness quietly acknowledge, yes, I see it too. Maybe that's what this entire broadcast really is, underneath everything else. A long signal sent into darkness searching for resonance. And if you're listening right now, somewhere in the early morning hours while the rest of the world sleeps or pretends to sleep, maybe you've felt these things too. Maybe you've noticed the atmosphere changing. Maybe you've felt that weird grief for a version of life you can't fully explain to other people. Maybe you sat in parking lots longer than necessary because going home immediately felt emotionally wrong for reasons you couldn't articulate. Maybe you've looked around lately and realized everybody seems slightly dissociated, but continues functioning anyway. Like society itself is running on emotional autopilot. And maybe the strangest part is this. Most people still look normal. That's what makes modern exhaustion difficult to detect. People still go to work, still answer email, still joke around, still buy groceries, still post vacation photos. But underneath, there's this quiet, atmospheric fatigue spreading through everything. A kind of soul-level overstimulation. And I don't think the solution is simple. I don't think there's just one villain, one app, one technology, one ideology. I think human beings entered an environment evolving faster than our emotional adaptation can keep up with. Which means we're all just improvising right now. Trying to rediscover humanity inside systems not necessarily designed around human nervous systems. And strangely, I think people are beginning to push back. Quietly. Not politically necessarily, but biologically. I feel like more people are craving offline experiences. Just wanting slower conversations. People are buying physical books again. Taking walks without headphones. Leaving their phone in other rooms. Driving without destination. Listening to long, strange radio broadcasts in the middle of the night. These are tiny rebellions. tiny recoveries. Maybe that's hopeful. I think it is. Because despite everything, people still respond to sincerity instantly. People still recognize emotional truth immediately. People still hunger for wonder. That part survived. Even now. Especially now. Somewhere out there tonight, someone is driving through fog, listening to this station, wondering if they're becoming a different person than they used to be. And maybe they are. But maybe becoming different is not the same thing as becoming lost. Maybe part of adulthood is slowly realizing you're not a finished structure. You are weather. You are seasons moving through themselves. And some nights exist specifically to remind you of that. Not to solve anything, just to notice. The hour's getting late now. Street lights are humming. Vending machines are glowing. Distant trucks moving through invisible highways somewhere beyond the edge of town. And for a few minutes at least, maybe the world feels a little less aggressively explained. Maybe uncertainty became bearable again. Maybe silence stopped feeling empty. Maybe you remembered there are still hidden frequencies beneath all this noise. And maybe that matters more than we realize. Until next time, stay strange in the silence. Keep the dial somewhere between wonder and understanding.